A crazy idea turned me into the most beautiful girl. I've always been the quiet guy, the one people forget about in a crowded room. Not that I minded. I was Ethan, 19, a guy with average looks, average interests, and average friends. I was content in my little world, blending in, going through life unnoticed. That was fine with me. I didn't need attention, and I certainly didn't need to stand out. Then everything changed. In the blink of an eye, I went from being the guy who hid in the shadows to someone everyone noticed. And it all started with a ridiculous idea. A dare. It was a Friday night when Luke, my best friend, my partner in crime, the guy who loved pushing boundaries, came up with a challenge. He grinned like a kid with a mischievous secret, eyes gleaming with that familiar excitement. "What if you spent a week as a girl?" he asked, his tone more playful than serious. I couldn't even begin to process it at first. The thought of it was absurd, right?
Me?
A girl? The whole thing sounded like something out of a bad comedy film. But Luke wasn't one to back down from a challenge, and the more he teased me, the more I found myself reluctantly agreeing. It was supposed to be a joke, a one-time experiment, a ridiculous dare we could laugh about for years. But that was before I saw myself in the mirror. It wasn't until I stood in front of the mirror, dressed in a tight black dress and sporting a full face of makeup, that the reality of what I'd agreed to truly hit me. Luke had pulled out all the stops. He took me to a store, picked out the clothes, and even helped me with the makeup. I didn't recognize the person looking back at me. I stared at my reflection, my stomach tightening as I realized what I had done. This wasn't just a laugh. This wasn't just a one-time thing. I looked beautiful. Not just pretty, but stunning. My cheekbones stood out sharper. My eyes were wide and framed perfectly by the mascara. And my lips, well, they looked better than I ever thought possible. I had spent my entire life trying to avoid attention, always shrinking away from anything that could make me stand out. But here I was, standing in front of a mirror, a girl. "You look amazing," Luke said from behind me, his voice laced with awe. But his words hit me like a tidal wave. Was he really complimenting me? Or was he just playing along with the joke? I swallowed, unsure of how to respond. "This isn't right," I muttered, more to myself than to Luke. But even as I said it, I couldn't stop my hands from adjusting my hair, smoothing out the dress. It was like something inside of me had clicked into place. "Just try it, man," Luke urged, his grin never fading. "We'll go out, have some fun. It's just for the weekend. Then you can go back to being Ethan." But deep down, I felt that this was no longer just a weekend experiment. It was something more, a transformation that I hadn't signed up for. I couldn't back out now. I had already gone too far. The first night out as evil was a blur. I was so caught up in the sheer absurdity of it all that I barely had time to think about anything else. Luke dragged me into a local bar where we met up with some of his friends. The moment I stepped inside, I felt 1,000 eyes on me. I wanted to shrink into myself, disappear into the wall, but something unexpected happened. I didn't. Instead, I straightened up, adjusted my dress, and smiled. I smiled like I belonged. Luke wasn't the only one who seemed taken aback by the change. Every person who saw me seemed to stop what they were doing to stare for just a second longer. Guys were looking at me differently. Guys who would have never given me a second glance when I was Ethan. Their eyes lingered, appreciating something I didn't even know I had. I wanted to be uncomfortable, but instead, I felt a strange rush of power, as if I had control over something I never knew I could. By the end of the night, I was the center of attention. Every conversation, every compliment, it was all directed at me. But it wasn't just about the looks, it was the way people treated me. Guys were polite. They held doors open. They smiled. Even the women, who were once aloof and cold, now seemed interested in me. There was something intoxicating about it. The way the world shifted when I wore a dress and heels. But there was a catch. I didn't feel like me. I didn't feel like Ethan anymore. I wasn't just a guy in a dress. I was someone else entirely. And as much as I hated to admit it, I was enjoying it. Luke noticed it too. "You're getting into it," he teased as we headed back to his apartment that night. "I can tell." I rolled my eyes. "It's just a joke, Luke. Don't get any ideas." But even as I said it, there was a nagging voice in my head telling me that this wasn't just about a joke. It was about something deeper, something I couldn't ignore. "Maybe you should go for it," Luke said the next day, while we were having lunch. You're kind of killing it as Eva." His voice was playful, but there was something in his tone that made my skin crawl. Was he suggesting I actually continue this? I wasn't sure if he was serious, or if he was just messing with me. But what if I did? What if I let myself be Eva for real? That question gnawed at me for the next few days. I couldn't shake it. Every time I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw something different. The reflection staring back at me wasn't just a disguise. It was someone I recognized, but it wasn't who I thought I was. Luke pushed me further. "Come on, we should go out again. Let's make this night count." He was relentless, and part of me I didn't even understand, wanted to go along with it. The night we went out again, everything changed. I was no longer just pretending to be a girl. I was living as one. And the strangest thing was I was good at it. I was good at being Eva. I was getting attention, flirting, smiling in a way that felt natural. Every moment felt like a performance, but the more I did it, the more I wanted to see how far I could go. And then, in the middle of it all, I realized something. I had a choice. I could stop. I could go back to being Ethan, the quiet, invisible guy. But I didn't want to. I didn't want to lose what I had found in Eva. I was drawn to it, like a moth to a flame. The decision was made. I would embrace this new version of myself, at least for now. I would see how far I could go. Over the next few days, the transformation continued, but it wasn't just physical. I spent hours getting ready each morning, learning how to apply makeup like a pro, how to walk in heels, how to talk like Eva. I was changing, but I didn't know if I was ready to accept it. My reflection in the mirror became less of a stranger and more like a new version of me. The physical changes were undeniable. My body, once just another average male frame, started to feel different. I felt more aware of my curves, my hips, the way my dress clung to my body. I had always been self-conscious about my appearance, but now I was starting to enjoy it. I was becoming beautiful, more beautiful than I had ever been as Ethan. It was a strange feeling, a mix of pride and confusion. But as I walked down the street, I saw the way people looked at me, like I was something special. I wasn't just blending into the background anymore. I was the center of attention. Luke's eyes never left me. He watched as I walked through the room, and I could tell he was both impressed and maybe something else. I wasn't sure what it was, but it felt like there was more going on than just a dare. But as much as I enjoyed the attention, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something I was missing. Luke's fascination with my transformation was becoming more intense, more personal. He kept complimenting me, making comments that crossed the line between friendly and possessive. I tried to ignore it. I was starting to like this new me, but what did it mean for my friendship with Luke? Could I still go back to being just Ethan? Or was Eva here to stay? The climax came when we went out one night, and I met someone. A guy, tall, confident, with a smile that made my heart race. He approached me like I was the most desirable thing in the room, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. "You're stunning," he said, his voice low and smooth. I felt my breath catch in my throat. This was real. This wasn't just a game anymore. People were noticing me. They were really noticing me. But then I turned to look at Luke. He was standing in the corner, watching me, his face unreadable. There was something in his eyes, something that felt possessive, something that made my stomach drop. I didn't know what to make of it. Was he angry? Was he jealous? I had no idea. All I knew was that I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't turn back from. By the end of that night, I knew something had changed. I had changed. But more importantly, I had learned something about myself. I wasn't just Ethan anymore. I wasn't just Eva either. I was both. And maybe that was okay. Maybe I didn't have to be one or the other. Maybe it wasn't about fitting into a mold. It was about embracing who I was. All the pieces that made me who I am. I wasn't the shy, invisible guy anymore. And I wasn't just the girl who wore the dress. I was someone who had learned to stand out, to embrace the power of transformation. Inside and out. It had started as a crazy idea, but it had turned me into the most beautiful girl. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be.